Jake Morrison pressed his face against the small window of the transport ship. Below him, the fortress moon of Vextar looked like a giant metal ball covered in towers and weapon platforms. This was where he would spend the next year of his life if he survived that long. The other passengers on the ship were not human. Jake could see their reflection in the window behind him. There was a tall creature with blue skin and 4 arms. Another looked like a walking rock with glowing red eyes. A third had silver metal parts covering half of its body. They all looked strong and dangerous. Jake felt small next to them. "First time seeing aliens, human?" asked a voice behind him. Jake turned around. The creature speaking to him had green scales covering its body. It stood almost 8 feet tall on 2 powerful legs. Its hands ended in sharp claws that could probably cut through steel. Yellow eyes stared down at Jake with what looked like amusement. "Yes, sir," Jake replied. He tried to keep his voice steady. "I am Cadet Vorthak. You must be one of the humans we heard about. There are supposed to be 3 of you coming to the academy." "3?" Jake asked. He had not known there would be others. "Yes. The Galactic Coalition decided to let some humans try our training program. Most of us think it is a waste of time. Humans are soft creatures from a peaceful planet. You will probably quit in the first week." Jake nodded but did not answer. He had heard this before. Everyone seemed to think humans were weak. Maybe they were right. But Jake had come too far to give up now. The transport ship landed with a heavy thud. Jake grabbed his small bag and followed the other cadets outside. The air on Vextar was thin and cold. Strange smells filled his nose. In the distance, he could see the massive walls of the Caleth Imperial War Academy. "New cadets, form a line," shouted a voice. Jake looked toward the sound. A creature even bigger than the one on the ship stood waiting for them. This one had dark red scales and scars covering its arms and face. Its yellow eyes swept over the group of new cadets like it was looking for weakness. "I am Commander Zixthor," the creature said. Its voice was deep and rough. "For the next year, this academy will be your home. Many of you will not make it to graduation. Some of you will not make it to next week." The commander's eyes stopped on Jake. "Ah yes, the humans. I have read your files. Your species has only been in space for a few decades. You have no real wars, no serious conflicts. Your planet is soft and green and safe." The commander stepped closer to Jake. "Tell me, human, why do you think you belong here?" Jake looked up at the massive creature. His heart was beating fast, but he kept his voice calm. "I want to learn, sir. I want to prove that humans can be good soldiers." Commander Zixthor laughed. It was not a nice sound. "Good soldiers are made through pain and fear and loss. Has your species ever known real pain?" "I think so, sir," Jake said. "You think so?" The commander leaned down until its face was inches from Jake's. "You will learn what pain really means here, little human. If you survive long enough." The commander moved away and continued talking to the group. "The Caleth Imperial War Academy trains the finest warriors in the galaxy. We have trained soldiers from 12 different species. Each species brings their own strengths. The Vorthak are strong and tough. The Nexari are fast and smart. The Brawn have armor that can stop plasma fire." The commander looked at Jake again. "And humans? What do humans bring? You are not the strongest or the fastest. Your planet has no dangerous animals. Your people live easy lives. But the Coalition Council says we must give you a chance. So we will." A smaller creature with blue skin stepped forward. "New cadets will be assigned to barracks. You will have 1 hour to settle in. Then training begins." Jake followed the group toward a large gray building. Inside, the halls were long and cold. His room was small with 2 beds and 2 lockers. One bed was already taken. A young man with dark hair sat on it looking worried. "You must be Jake Morrison," the man said. "I am Danny Clark. I guess we are roommates." "Nice to meet you," Jake said. He put his bag on the empty bed. "This place is pretty scary." "Scary?" "It is terrifying," Danny said. "Did you see the size of that, Commander?" "And the other cadets look like they could kill us with their bare hands." "Maybe," Jake said. "But we are here now. We might as well try our best." Danny shook his head. "I heard some of the other cadets talking on the transport. They were betting on how long humans would last. Most bets were for less than 1 week." Jake looked out the small window in their room. He could see other cadets walking around the academy grounds. They all looked confident and strong. He wondered if Danny was right. Maybe humans really did not belong here. "Time for orientation," shouted a voice in the hallway. Jake and Danny joined the other new cadets in a large room. Commander Zixthor stood at the front with several other instructors. They were all big and covered in scars. "These are your instructors," the commander said. "Instructor Vexcall will handle combat training." He pointed to a creature with black scales and metal implants in its arms. "Instructor Mordak will teach weapons and tactics. Instructor Theiss handles survival training." Each instructor looked more dangerous than the last. Jake noticed that they all kept looking at him and Danny with expressions that seemed almost hungry. "Your training will push you beyond your limits," Commander Zixthor continued. "We will test your strength, your speed, your intelligence, and your will to fight. Many of you will discover that you are not as strong as you thought. Some of you will go home broken." The commander walked over to stand directly in front of Jake. "The academy has a simple rule. Those who are weak will be removed. Those who are strong will become warriors. There is no middle ground." Jake met the commander's eyes. He could feel fear in his stomach, but he did not look away. "Your first test begins tomorrow at dawn," the commander said. "Physical assessment. We will see what each species can do. Get some rest. You will need it." As the cadets filed out of the room, Jake heard them talking in their own languages. He could not understand the words, but the tone was clear. They were excited about tomorrow. They wanted to see the humans fail. That night, Jake lay in his bed staring at the ceiling. Danny was already asleep, but Jake could not stop thinking. Maybe everyone was right. Maybe humans were too weak for this place. Maybe he would be going home in a few days. But something deep inside him disagreed. Humans had survived ice ages and plagues and wars. They had climbed mountains and crossed oceans and reached for the stars. Maybe they were not the biggest or the fastest, but they were stubborn. They did not give up easily. Jake closed his eyes and tried to sleep. Tomorrow would be his first real test. He would find out what he was made of. The alarm rang at 4 a.m. Jake woke up quickly, but Danny groaned and pulled his blanket over his head. "Come on," Jake said, shaking his roommate's shoulder. "We cannot be late on our first day." "5 more minutes," Danny mumbled. Jake was already getting dressed. "They will probably make us run extra laps if we are late." That got Danny moving. They joined the other cadets in the hallway and marched to the training grounds. The sun was not up yet, and the air was freezing cold. Jake could see his breath making small clouds in front of his face. Instructor Vexicol stood waiting for them. In the morning light, he looked even more dangerous than before. The black scales covering his body seemed to absorb light. His yellow eyes moved over the group of cadets like he was choosing which one to eat first. "Physical assessment begins now," the instructor said. "First test is endurance. You will run until I tell you to stop. Anyone who falls behind will be removed from the program." The instructor pointed to a path that wound around the academy grounds. "Begin running, now." Jake started jogging at a steady pace. The other cadets quickly spread out. The Nexari with their cybernetic legs moved to the front of the group. The big brawn cadets fell behind because of their heavy armor. Danny stayed close to Jake, but he was already breathing hard. After an hour, Jake was still running. His legs hurt and his lungs burned, but he kept going. Danny was struggling beside him, stumbling every few steps. Several cadets had already dropped out and were sitting on the ground looking sick. After 2 hours, only half the cadets were still running. Jake was surprised to find that he was keeping up with most of the alien cadets. His human body seemed built for this kind of steady, long-distance running. "Keep going, human," called out Vorthak, the green-scaled cadet from the transport ship. "You are doing better than expected." Jake nodded but saved his breath for running. Beside him, Danny was getting worse. His face was pale and sweat was pouring down his forehead. "I cannot do this," Danny gasped. "My chest feels like it is on fire." "Just a little more," Jake said. "We can do this," but Danny suddenly stopped running and fell to his knees. "I cannot breathe. Something is wrong." Jake stopped to help his friend, but Instructor Vexcall appeared beside them. "Cadet Clark will go to the medical bay," the instructor said. "Cadet Morrison will continue running. But my friend needs help," Jake said. The instructor's eyes narrowed. "Your friend is weak. You can choose to be weak with him, or you can continue your training. Choose now." Jake looked at Danny, who was being helped by 2 medical personnel. His friend gave him a weak smile and waved him on. Jake started running again. By the end of the 3rd hour, only 6 cadets were still running. Jake was one of them. His legs felt like rubber and his vision was getting blurry. But he kept putting one foot in front of the other. "Stop," Instructor Vexcall finally called out. Jake slowed to a walk, then sat down hard on the ground. His whole body was shaking and he felt like he might throw up. But he had finished the test. "Interesting," the instructor said, looking down at Jake. The human lasted longer than most. Perhaps you are not as weak as you look. The next test was strength. Cadets had to lift heavy weights and carry them across a training field. This time Jake did not do as well. His human muscles were smaller than the alien cadets. But he noticed something else. While the other cadets used brute force, Jake found ways to make the job easier. He used his legs more than his arms. He found better grips on the weights. He moved more efficiently. The human is thinking, observed Instructor Mordak, who was watching the test. Most cadets just use muscle. This one uses his brain. The third test was pain tolerance. Cadets had to hold their hands in freezing water for as long as possible. One by one, the alien cadets pulled their hands out and shook them to get feeling back. Jake gritted his teeth and kept his hands in the water. The cold felt like knives cutting his skin, but he forced himself to stay calm. When the test ended, Jake had lasted the longest. His hands were blue and numb, but he had not given up. Very interesting, Instructor Vexcall said. He was staring at Jake with a strange expression. Tell me, human, what were you thinking about while your hands were in that water? I was thinking about home, sir, Jake said. About why I came here. And why did you come here? Jake looked the instructor in the eyes. To prove that humans belong among the stars, sir. The instructor nodded slowly. We will see about that. Over the next few weeks, the training got much harder. Cadets were put in gravity chambers that made them feel like they weighed twice as much. They trained in rooms that were boiling hot or freezing cold. They went days without sleep while running combat simulations. Many cadets quit. Others were injured and sent home. Danny lasted 2 weeks before he had a complete breakdown during a torture resistance exercise. Jake watched his friend being carried away on a stretcher, mumbling about how the instructors were trying to kill them all. They are not trying to train us, Danny whispered to Jake as he was taken to the transport ship. They are trying to prove we do not belong here. Jake was alone now. The other human cadet had quit after the first week. Jake was the last human left in the program. The alien cadets started treating him differently. At first, they had ignored him or made jokes about weak humans. Now they watched him with respect and curiosity. Jake had survived everything the instructors threw at him. How do you do it? Asked Vorthak one evening. They were sitting in the cafeteria after a particularly brutal day of training. My species is bred for war. We are born fighters, but you keep up with us and you are just a human from a peaceful planet. Jake thought about the question. Maybe humans are not as peaceful as everyone thinks. What do you mean? On Earth, humans used to hunt animals much bigger than themselves. We would chase them for days until they collapsed from exhaustion. We survived ice ages and disasters that killed most other species. Maybe we look soft, but we are good at surviving. Vorthak nodded slowly. Perhaps there is more to humans than we realized. Instructor Vexcall had become obsessed with Jake. The instructor gave him extra training, harder tests, and impossible tasks. It was clear that Vexcall was trying to break him. You think you are special, human? The instructor said during one training session. You think surviving a few tests makes you a warrior? Jake was hanging from a bar with weights attached to his legs. He had been there for an hour, and his arms felt like they were going to fall off. No, sir, I think surviving makes me human. What does that mean? It means I do not break easy, sir. The instructor laughed, but there was no humor in it. Everyone breaks eventually, human. Everyone has a limit. Maybe, sir. But you have not found mine yet. As the weeks passed, Jake noticed that he was changing. His body was getting stronger, but more importantly, his mind was getting sharper. He could predict what the instructors would do next. He could see patterns in their training methods. He learned to help other cadets without getting caught, sharing water and advice that helped them survive. The other cadets began to look to him for leadership. When Vorthak was injured during a live weapons exercise, it was Jake who carried him to safety. When a Nexari cadet was about to quit, Jake talked him into staying. Why do you help us? Asked the Nexari cadet. We are not your species. We are your competition. Because we are all in this together, Jake said. If we help each other, we all get stronger. By the end of the second phase of training, half the original cadets had quit or been removed. Jake was still there, scarred and tired but unbroken. He had earned something he never expected from the alien cadets: respect. But Instructor Vexcall was not finished with him yet. Jake could see it in the instructor's eyes. The real test was still coming. The third phase of training was different. Instead of exercises and simulations, the remaining cadets would face real combat. Jake packed his gear and boarded the military ship Stellar Fang with 20 other cadets who had survived the first 2 phases. "Listen carefully," said Captain Korath, a scarred veteran with metal implants covering half his face. "We are hunting Void Wraith pirates in the Kepler Nebula. These are not training dummies or computer simulations. They will try to kill you. If you are not ready for real combat, speak up now." None of the cadets said anything. Jake looked around at his fellow survivors. Forthak was there, along with 3 Nixari cadets and 2 massive Brawn warriors. They had all been through hell together at the academy. Now they would find out who was truly ready for war. The Stellar Fang was a warship built for hunting pirates. It had thick armor and powerful weapons. As they traveled through space toward the nebula, Jake studied the ship's systems and learned everything he could about their enemy. The Void Wraiths were a species that lived by raiding and stealing. They attacked merchant ships and took whatever they could carry. They were fast and vicious, but not well organized. Their ships were quick but lightly armored. "First rule of combat," said Sergeant Thorne, their squad leader for this mission. "Stay alive. Dead soldiers cannot complete missions. Second rule, complete the mission. We are here to stop the pirates from attacking innocent ships." The squad spent hours practicing boarding techniques. They would enter enemy ships through airlocks or holes blown in the hull. Once inside, they had to clear each room of enemies while avoiding damage to the ship's vital systems. "Morrison," called Sergeant Thorne, "you will be our scout. Your job is to move ahead of the squad and report what you see."
"Can you handle that?"
"Yes, sir," Jake replied. Being the scout was dangerous, but it also meant the sergeant trusted his judgment. Their first real mission came 3 days later. A merchant convoy had sent a distress signal. Void Wraith ships were attacking them. The Stellar Fang arrived to find 2 pirate vessels trying to board a cargo ship. "Boarding party. Prepare for action," came the announcement over the ship's speakers. Jake checked his weapon and armor one more time. His heart was beating fast, but his hands were steady. This was what he had trained for. The squad launched in a small assault craft and attached to the side of the first pirate ship. Jake used a cutting torch to make a hole in the hull, then climbed through into the enemy ship. Inside, the pirate ship was dark and filled with smoke. Emergency lights cast red shadows on the walls. Jake moved carefully through the narrow corridors, checking each room for enemies. 2 pirates in the engine room, he whispered into his radio. 3 more on the bridge. The squad followed his reports and cleared the ship room by room. The Void Wraiths fought fiercely, but they were no match for trained coalition soldiers. Within an hour, the first ship was secured. But the second pirate ship was different. As soon as the squad boarded, they walked into a trap. Pirates were waiting in ambush, and a fierce firefight broke out in the ship's cargo bay. "We are pinned down," shouted Sergeant Thorne. "Morrison, find us another way out." Jake crawled through a maintenance shaft while laser blasts flew over his head. He found a way to get behind the pirates, but it would mean leaving the safety of the squad. "I can get to the ship's main power core," he radioed. "If I shut it down, their weapons will stop working." "Too dangerous," the sergeant replied. "Find another way." But Jake could see that there was no other way. The pirates had them trapped, and more enemy soldiers were coming. He made a decision. "Sorry, sir. Going dark." Jake turned off his radio and crawled deeper into the ship. The power core was heavily shielded and surrounded by radiation warnings. Normal procedure would be to shut it down slowly and safely, but there was no time for that. Jake set small explosive charges around the core's containment system. When they went off, the explosion would shut down all power on the ship. It would also flood the area with deadly radiation. Jake would have maybe 30 seconds to get to a shielded area before the radiation killed him. He set the timer and ran for a small maintenance compartment he had spotted earlier. It was not rated for radiation protection, but it was the only shelter available. The explosion shook the entire ship. All the lights went out, and Jake could hear the pirates shouting in confusion as their weapons stopped working. He huddled in the tiny compartment as radiation alarms screamed through the ship. According to his dosimeter, the radiation levels should have killed him, but somehow Jake was still alive. Maybe the compartment provided more protection than expected. Maybe he got lucky. Or maybe humans were tougher than anyone realized. When the radiation levels dropped enough, Jake emerged from his hiding place. The squad had cleared the ship and secured all the pirates. Sergeant Thorne stared at Jake like he was seeing a ghost. "How are you still alive?" the sergeant asked. "The radiation in that area should have killed anything." I do not know, sir, Jake said honestly. Maybe I am harder to kill than I look. Word of Jake's actions spread through the ship. The other cadets looked at him with a mixture of respect and unease. He had done something that should have been impossible. He had volunteered for a suicide mission and survived. Instructor Vexcall, who was monitoring the mission from the command ship, watched the recordings of Jake's actions over and over again. The human moved through combat situations with cold intelligence. Like war was just another problem to solve. The real test came during a rescue mission on the mining world of Torn 5. Separatist rebels had taken over the mining facility and were holding civilian workers as hostages. The mission was to rescue the civilians without getting them killed. The other cadets wanted to assault the facility with overwhelming force. The Braun cadets suggested using heavy weapons to blast through the walls. The Nexari cadets proposed using their speed and technology for a quick strike. Jake spent 3 days watching the facility from a distance. He studied guard patterns, shift changes, and supply deliveries. He learned which guards were lazy and which were alert. He figured out when the rebels were most distracted. His plan was simple but risky. He would sneak into the facility inside a supply container. Once inside, he would quietly eliminate key guards and create a diversion that would make the rebels think they were under attack by a full military force. "That is suicide," said Vorthak. "You cannot take on 50 rebels by yourself." "I am not going to fight them," Jake explained. "I am going to make them fight shadows while the civilians escape." Jake hid inside a food container that was being delivered to the rebel base. It was cramped and uncomfortable, but he waited patiently until the container was brought inside. When the guards were not looking, he slipped out and began moving through the facility. He did not fight the rebels directly. Instead, he created chaos. He sabotaged their communication so they could not coordinate. He set small fires that looked like attacks. He moved their weapons to different locations so guards would think their positions had been compromised. The rebels began shooting at shadows and suspecting each other of being traitors. In the confusion, Jake opened the doors to the civilian areas and guided the hostages to safety through maintenance tunnels he had mapped earlier. By the time coalition forces arrived for the planned assault, Jake had already evacuated all the civilians and turned the rebel force into a panicked mob fighting an enemy that did not exist. The after-action report called his performance tactically brilliant but psychologically concerning. Jake had single-handedly defeated a force 10 times his size without firing a shot. He had turned the rebels' own paranoia and confusion against them. "How did you know they would react that way?" asked Captain Korath later. Jake thought about the question. "Humans have been fighting each other for thousands of years. We learned how people think when they are scared and confused. I just used what my species already knows." The captain stared at him for a long moment. "Remind me never to make humans angry." As the training missions continued, Jake's reputation grew. Other cadets began copying his tactics. Even veteran soldiers started asking for his advice on difficult missions. But Instructor Vexcall seemed more disturbed by Jake's success than impressed. "The human is too calm," the instructor told Captain Korath. "He approaches combat like it is a puzzle to solve, not a life or death struggle. That is not natural. Maybe that is what makes him effective," the captain replied. "Or what makes him dangerous," the instructor said quietly. Jake could feel the instructor's eyes on him during every mission. He knew that Vexcall was planning something. The final test was still coming, and Jake had a feeling it would be unlike anything he had faced before. Instructor Vexcall could not sleep. For weeks, he had been studying reports about the human cadet Jake Morrison. Every mission, every training exercise, every combat situation showed the same disturbing pattern. The human did not just survive impossible situations. He thrived in them. The instructor sat in his private office, staring at video recordings of Jake's latest mission. The human moved through enemy territory like he could predict what would happen next. He solved problems that should have taken teams of specialists. Most unsettling of all, he did it while staying perfectly calm and collected. "Computer, access coalition database on human military history," Vexcall said. "Access granted," replied the computer. "Warning. Much of human military data is classified at high security levels. Override classification. Instructor Authority Vexcall 77 Alpha." Files began appearing on his screen. At first, Vexcall saw what everyone expected to see. Humans were a young species who had only recently developed space travel. Their planet was peaceful and green. They had no major wars or conflicts in recent history. But as he dug deeper, the instructor found older files. Much older files. Computers show human evolutionary history. What appeared on the screen made Vexcal's scales crawl. Humans had not evolved on a peaceful planet. Earth was a death world filled with massive predators, deadly diseases, and environmental disasters. Ice ages had covered the planet multiple times. Volcanoes had blocked out the sun for years. Asteroid impacts had wiped out most life forms, and humans had survived all of it. Computer, show human hunting techniques from pre-space era. The files that appeared showed a species that was nothing like the peaceful farmers and scientists the galaxy knew today. Early humans had hunted animals 10 times their size using nothing but sharp sticks and teamwork. They had chased prey for days without stopping, running their targets to death through pure endurance. Computer, show human warfare from pre-space era. Vexcal spent hours reading reports that grew more disturbing with each page. Humans had fought wars that lasted for decades. They had developed weapons designed to cause maximum psychological damage. They had created strategies based on turning enemies against each other. One particular file caught his attention. It described something called psychological warfare, where humans would defeat enemies without fighting them directly. They would spread fear, confusion, and paranoia until their enemies destroyed themselves. It was exactly what Jake Morrison had done on Torren 5. Computer, current threat assessment for human species. Current assessment, minimal threat. Humans are classified as peaceful traders and explorers. No significant military capability. Vexcal stared at the screen. The Coalition had made a terrible mistake. They had looked at modern human society and assumed that was what humans really were. They had ignored 10,000 years of evolution that had created the most successful predator species in known galactic history. Humans were not peaceful farmers who learned to fight. They were born killers who learned to cooperate. The instructor thought about Jake Morrison's performance over the past months. The human had survived training designed to break the toughest species in the galaxy. He had adapted to every challenge, overcome every obstacle, and earned the loyalty of every cadet he served with, and he had done it all while barely trying. What happens when he stops holding back? Vexcal asked himself. The thought terrified him. The next morning, Vexcal called a meeting with the other instructors and senior academy officials. "We have a problem," he announced. "The human cadet Morrison is not what he appears to be." "What do you mean?" asked Commander Zixthor. "He has performed well in training, but within acceptable parameters." "That is exactly the problem," Vexcal replied. "He is performing within acceptable parameters while doing things that should be impossible." The instructor showed them videos of Jake's missions. "Watch how he moves. See how he anticipates enemy actions. Notice how he stays calm in situations that would panic veteran soldiers. This is not normal behavior for any species." "Perhaps humans are simply more adaptable than we thought," suggested Instructor Mordak. "I researched human evolutionary history," Vexcal said. "Humans are not adaptable. They are apex predators who evolved on a death world. Everything about their psychology and physiology is designed for hunting and killing." The room fell silent as the other instructors processed this information. "But humans are peaceful," protested Commander Zixthor. "They trade with other species. They help with scientific research. They have no aggressive expansion policies. That is what makes them so dangerous," Vexcal replied. "They are apex predators who learn to disguise themselves as prey. The Coalition thinks it is training a few human soldiers. What we are actually doing is teaching warfare techniques to a species that has spent millions of years perfecting the art of killing." The instructors looked at each other with growing concern. "What do you recommend?" asked the commander. Vexcal had been thinking about this all night. "The final training exercise is individual combat against instructors. I will face Morrison personally. If he truly is what I think he is, the combat will reveal it." "That could be dangerous," warned Instructor Mordak. "If you are right about human nature, provoking him might not be wise." "It is a risk we must take," Vexcal replied. "We need to know what humans really are before we send Morrison back to his people with everything he has learned here." The meeting ended with approval for Vexcal's plan. The final exercise would be announced soon, and the instructor would have his chance to test the human's true nature. But first, there was something else he needed to do. That evening, Vexcall walked through the Academy's Memorial Hall. The walls were covered with names and pictures of fallen warriors from every species in the Coalition. Thousands of soldiers who had died in service to galactic peace and security. Jake Morrison was there too, standing quietly in front of a memorial wall dedicated to human soldiers who had died in the few small conflicts Earth had been involved in. There were not many names compared to other species, but Jake was studying each one carefully. Thinking about death, human? Vexcall asked as he approached. Jake did not turn around. Thinking about sacrifice, sir. These soldiers died protecting people they never met from threats they did not create. That takes something special. What does it take? The willingness to put others before yourself. The ability to see beyond your own survival. Jake finally turned to face the instructor. The courage to do what is right even when it costs everything. Vexcall studied the human's face. There was something different about Jake's expression. His eyes held a depth that had not been there before. Months of training and combat had changed him in ways that went beyond physical conditioning. Tell me something, Morrison. What do you see when you look at these names? Jake was quiet for a long moment. I see teachers, sir. Every fallen warrior teaches us something about courage, duty, and sacrifice. The question is whether we are smart enough to learn from their lessons. And what have you learned? Jake's smile was cold and distant. That war is not about being the strongest or fastest, sir. It is about understanding your enemy better than they understand themselves. It is about being willing to do whatever is necessary to protect what you care about. The instructor felt a chill run down his spine. This was not the eager young cadet who had arrived months ago. This was something else entirely. Tomorrow you will face your final test, Vexcall said. Individual combat against an instructor. Are you ready? I have been ready since the day I arrived, sir, Jake replied. The question is whether you are ready for what you will find. As Jake walked away, Vexcall remained in the memorial hall staring at the names on the walls. Tomorrow he would discover what humans really were. He just hoped the galaxy was ready for the answer. The combat arena filled with spectators from across the galaxy. Word had spread through the Coalition about the final test at the Keleth Imperial War Academy. Everyone wanted to see if the human cadet could really compete with the galaxy's most elite warriors. Jake stood in the preparation room, checking his armor and weapons one last time. Through the walls, he could hear the crowd gathering in the arena. Thousands of aliens had come to watch him fight Instructor Vexcall. You do not have to do this, said Vorthak, who had come to see his friend before the fight. Everyone knows you have already proven yourself. You could withdraw with honor. Jake shook his head. This is what I came here for. To show that humans belong among the stars. But Vexcall is a veteran of 40 campaigns. He has killed over 200 enemies in personal combat. He is not just testing you, he is trying to break you. Maybe, Jake said, but he made one mistake. What mistake? Jake looked at his friend with eyes that seemed older than his years. He thinks breaking me is possible. The two cadets walked to the arena entrance. Jake could see Instructor Vexcall waiting in the center of the fighting circle. The alien looked even more dangerous than usual, with fresh scars painted on his scales and razor-sharp claws gleaming under the arena lights. Commander Zixthor stood at the edge of the arena with other Academy officials. Cadet Morrison, this is your final test. Defeat your instructor in single combat and you will graduate with full honors. Fail, and your training ends here. Jake stepped into the arena. The crowd noise was deafening. He could see aliens from dozens of different species in the stands, all watching to see what the human would do. Rules are simple, announced the commander. No weapons except what you can take from your opponent. Fight continues until one combatant cannot continue. Begin! Vexcall moved first. The massive alien was faster than Jake had expected, crossing the arena in 3 quick steps. Razor claws sliced through the air where Jake's head had been a moment before. Jake rolled to the side and came up in a defensive stance. Vexcall followed up with a series of attacks designed to overwhelm and intimidate. Claws struck like lightning, and powerful kicks sent shockwaves through the arena floor. For the first 10 minutes, Jake did exactly what everyone expected. He defended himself, dodged attacks, and looked for openings that never came. The crowd began to murmur that the human was outmatched, but Jake was not fighting to win yet. He was learning. Every attack taught him something about Vexcall's fighting style. Every movement revealed patterns and preferences. The instructor was skilled and experienced, but he was also predictable in the way that all highly trained fighters eventually become. Vexcall expected Jake to fight like the other cadets he had trained. He expected desperation, rage, or fear. Instead, Jake remained calm and analytical, studying his opponent like a puzzle to be solved. The turning point came when Vexcall tried to end the fight quickly with a devastating combination attack. Jake did not try to block or dodge. Instead, he stepped into the attack and used Vexcall's own momentum against him. It was a technique no military academy taught, because it required accepting injury to create opportunity. Jake took a deep claw strike across his chest, but the move put him inside Vexcall's guard for the first time. The crowd gasped as Jake grabbed the instructor's arm and used an ancient human wrestling throw to send the massive alien crashing to the arena floor. It was the first time in the fight that Jake had taken the offensive. "Impossible," whispered someone in the crowd. How did he do that? But Jake was just getting started. He began fighting like no one in the galaxy had ever seen before. He combined techniques from different human martial arts that had been developed over thousands of years of warfare. Moves that were designed not just to defeat opponents but to break their will to fight. Jake became unpredictable, switching between fighting styles with fluid adaptability. One moment he was using wrestling techniques to control distance and positioning. The next moment he was striking with precise attacks designed to cause maximum psychological impact. Vexcall realized too late that he was no longer fighting a cadet. The human's eyes had changed. There was no emotion in them, no anger or fear. Just cold calculation and predatory focus. "What are you?" Vexcall gasped as Jake countered another attack. "I am what you made me," Jake replied. His voice was calm and steady, like he was discussing the weather instead of fighting for his life. "You tried to break me like I was some weak prey animal. But humans are not prey. We never were." Jake began using psychological warfare techniques that turned the fight into something else entirely. He made Vexcall doubt his own skills, question his own tactics, and fear what the human might do next. "Your species conquered other worlds through superior strength and technology," Jake said as he dodged another attack. "My species conquered our own world by being smarter, tougher, and more adaptable than everything else that lived there." The crowd watched in stunned silence as the human began to dominate the fight. Jake was not just winning. He was teaching the galaxy something they had never understood about humanity. Vexcall threw everything he had at Jake, but nothing worked. Every technique the instructor had learned over decades of combat was countered by moves that seemed to come from nowhere. Jake fought like he had been studying Vexcall his entire life. "How?" Vexcall demanded. "How do you know what I will do before I do it?" "Because humans have been fighting each other for 10,000 years, Jake replied. "We learned to read body language, predict behavior, and exploit psychological weaknesses. We turned warfare into a science." The end came suddenly. Vexcall made one final desperate attack, putting all his strength and speed into a strike that should have ended the fight. Jake stepped aside at the last possible moment and grabbed the instructor's extended arm. What happened next would be recorded in Coalition military archives as the most shocking moment in Academy history. Jake Morrison, bloodied and exhausted, applied leverage and technique to break one of Instructor Vexcall's ribs and tear it from his body. The massive alien crashed to the arena floor, unconscious from pain and blood loss. Jake stood over his fallen instructor, holding the broken rib bone like a trophy. The arena fell completely silent. Thousands of alien spectators stared in disbelief at what they had just witnessed. A human had not just defeated one of the galaxy's most elite warriors. He had done so while carrying a piece of his opponent's skeleton as proof of victory. Jake looked up at the stunned crowd and spoke in a voice that carried across the entire arena. "You tried to break me. You tried to prove that humans do not belong among the stars. But you made one mistake. You taught me how to fight like you instead of fighting like me." Jake held up the bone for everyone to see. "Thank you for the lesson." Commander Zixthor stepped into the arena, his face pale with shock. "Cadet Morrison, you have passed your final test." "Thank you, sir," Jake replied. "When does the transport leave for Earth?" As medical teams rushed to help Instructor Vexcall, Jake walked out of the arena carrying his trophy. Behind him, Coalition officials began urgent conversations about what they had just witnessed. "Contact Central Command immediately," ordered one official. "We need to reassess our threat evaluation for the human species." "What do we tell them?" asked another. "Tell them we may have made a serious mistake. We thought we were training human soldiers. What we actually did was educate apex predators. Jake packed his belongings and prepared to return home to Earth. The other graduating cadets watched him with a mixture of respect and unease. They had seen something in that arena that changed how they would think about humans forever. As his transport ship prepared to depart, Jake stood at the same window where he had first seen the academy months ago. But now he was different. The training had revealed something about humanity that even Jake had not fully understood before. Humans were not the peaceful, weak species everyone believed them to be. They were survivors who had learned to disguise their true nature. They were predators who had evolved beyond the need for claws and fangs, using intelligence and adaptability as their weapons instead. The galaxy had just gotten its first real look at what humans could become when pushed to their limits. And Jake Morrison was going home to share everything he had learned with his own species. The transport ship departed from Vextar, carrying more than just a graduating cadet. It carried a warning that the galaxy was not yet ready to understand. Humanity had joined the stars not as prey seeking protection, but as hunters who had simply been waiting for their turn to hunt. Jake Morrison settled back in his seat for the long journey home, still carrying Instructor Vexcall's rib bone as a reminder of what he had learned. The galaxy would never look at humanity the same way again. And perhaps that was exactly what needed to happen.